referendum and took that huge gamble.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Well, if you've just joined us, the answer is of the referendum result is that 52% of the country voted to leave, 48% voted to stay. So the decision was absolutely clearly that the people of this country, by a majority of 4% in effect, want to leave the EU. And that has all sorts of ramifications, which we'll go into a bit later on. But at this point, let's have a full catch-up of news and weather. Here's Louise Minchin.
Thank you, David. Good morning. Britain has voted to leave the European Union. The Leave campaign has so far taken 52% of the vote. It's now impossible for Remain to overtake it. There have been strong winds for Leave in North East England and in the Midlands. Scotland and Northern Ireland voted to remain in the EU. This report by our political correspondent Eleanor Garnier begins with the moment the BBC announced its prediction.
Well, at 20 minutes to 5, we can now say the decision taken in 1975 by this country to join the common market has been reversed by this referendum to leave the EU. We are absolutely clear now that there is no way that the Remain side can win.
Watch and listen carefully. This is history in the making.
The British people have spoken, and the answer is we're out.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
And these were the celebrations just moments before the BBC called the result.
This will be a victory for real people, a victory for ordinary people, a victory for decent people.
With the pound plunging, Remain campaigners warned
Okay, so they proposed an idea of a vote.
On the lookout for moving cars or actual cars.
Really?
Because hermit crabs.
turmoil ahead.
This is a crushing decision. It's a
Away from the north of England in Basildon in Essex, another big win for Leave, particularly to stay in the EU, though the overall result will lead to renewed calls for a second referendum on Scottish independence. And London, as predicted, was a stronghold for Remain. But Britain has voted to leave the European Union, to tear up the settlement the countries had for decades, unleashing perhaps huge opportunity or perhaps huge risk, perhaps both. Eleanor Garnier, BBC News.
The results have upset the world's financial markets, with the pound falling again this morning to $1.34, its lowest point since 1985. When the polls closed, it soared to $1.50, but as they showed stronger than expected support for leaving the EU, it began to plummet. Markets in Asia are down nearly 3%. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has suggested the Leave vote will reignite demands for an independence referendum there. After all 32 Scottish local authorities returned majorities for Remain, Ms Sturgeon said the EU vote made clear that the people of Scotland see their future as part of the European Union. Sinn Féin says a British vote to leave the EU intensifies the case for a vote on whether Northern Ireland should leave the United Kingdom. The comments from the largest Irish nationalist party followed a result which saw 11 of the 18 constituencies voting to stay in the European Union. So that's the very latest for you. More, of course, in a few moments. First, though, let's catch up with the weather. Carol has it. Good morning.
Good morning, Lou. Good morning to you. Well, every picture tells a story. This is a beautiful one sent in this morning from one of our BBC weather watchers. Lovely rainbow in Gateshead. Now, some of us yesterday had torrential rain across the southeast. Today, in the southeast and East Anglia, will be a lot of sunshine around, but showers already in the north and the west will develop further and intensify in some parts as we go through the course of the day. By the afternoon, some of those showers across Scotland will be heavy and thundery, maybe with some hail. But in between, there will be some sunshine. It's the same across Northern Ireland. Showers and are fairly hit and miss. Highs of 21. Now, through this evening and overnight, many of the showers will fade. We'll hang on to some in the north and west. We'll also have some clear skies, but it's not going to be a cold night. In fact, temperatures staying in double figures. And then as we head on into tomorrow, again we'll see some showers, a different distribution. In the west, we'll have something that bit brighter. Back to you, David.
Thank you very much for that news. Now, of course, we're into a new world now. If you've just joined us, a new day has dawned in Britain. I'm joined here by Diane Abbott and Daniel Hannan, and we'll be talking to them in a moment. But first of all, on the financial front, and in case you missed the story, which you can't possibly have done, I think, it's that the referendum led to those who wish to leave winning by 4 percentage points over those who wish to remain in the EU. There have been various ramifications, and not least in the value of the pound and in the markets, but not just the currency markets, but the markets generally. Stephanie McGovern joins us from the Bank of England. What news do you have? What plans do they have, if any? Are they up and at work? Have they been up all night? What's going on?
Yeah, good morning, David. Morning, everybody. Yeah, they're certainly up and ready. I've seen quite a few people head in this morning into the Bank of England behind me because, of course, in the run-up to this referendum, the Governor, Mark Carney, said that the biggest immediate risk to global markets was the UK leaving the European Union, and they would do whatever they can, whatever action is necessary to reassure people and essentially keep things like inflation under control. So we know that Mark Carney now is preparing to speak. He says he's not going to speak until after David Cameron, after the Prime Minister has spoken, but then it won't be long before he will be telling us what the plans are for the Bank of England. Now, there's essentially two big issues here. One is around the volatility in the markets, particularly the currency markets, which we've seen overnight. I know Kamal's been keeping you on top of that, and the pound dropping so much could mean, of course, that inflation starts to head up as import prices become more expensive. It could put up the price of goods here and push inflation up, and the Bank of England has a target of 2% on inflation. If that tips over 2%, then we could see the Bank of England start to increase interest rates. But there are other concerns about that, because of course we're still a country that's in a lot of debt, so interest rates could hit the economy hard as well. However, we're also hearing the likes of Nigel Farage saying this morning that this is good news for exporters. For a long time, exporters have had it quite tough while the pound has been so high, so it would be good news for them. The other issue, of course, is the banking stability. Do you remember the financial crisis back in 2008? How could we forget it? When the Bank of England had to intervene with quantitative easing, essentially pumping more money into the system to make sure that banks had enough to be able to borrow and lend and keep the economy in tick. So we're still waiting to hear, but let me tell you, David, it's not going to be long before we hear from Mark. We're going to be heading into his office shortly to hear exactly what the Governor of the Bank of England has to say.
Stephen, just tell me something. How do they detect whether this is just a panic reaction? Because we know markets are very volatile, and they get a bit of bad news and they tumble, and then good news comes and up it goes again, because it's all people trading fast to make a profit for themselves. I mean, do you think these are substantial falls that are going to be sustained? Is that what you think the Bank of England think?
Well, as you saw last night, when initially we thought that we would be staying in the European Union, the pound headed up, didn't it? It hit 1.5 against the dollar at one point, and it started heading up, and since then has tanked again. You're right, on a day-to-day basis we see the markets head up and down quite a lot, and it's very hard to get a picture in